Hello everybody, this is Callie. Thanks so much for joining me today for a fun lawnfawn card. I have a twofer, or what I consider to be a twofer. You have a simple let it snow background here that you see, and then the Flippy Flappy mechanism will share a little small adorable scene using this Merry Mice set. So what I'm going to do today to begin is to stamp out my images and then quickly share some of the coloring with you. I'm going to speed through it. It's very simple. I am simply adding a darker shade first in the nooks and crannies of each of the sections of each image, and then I'm going to blend it out with a medium shade, and then with a lighter shade if there is enough space for a third shade to be introduced. So on the mice, I am using some warm grays, again adding the darkest color first, blending it out just a tad with a medium shade, and then blending the rest of it out with the lightest shade. And then I've added a little bit of pink to his tummy, his ears, and a bit of blush for his face. And then I'll color the ornaments super simple, 2 to 3 shades, and that goes really quick when you have a tiny surface. So once I'm done coloring, I've die cut all of my images, and I'm just quickly adding some white gel highlights. Okay, so now for the background, we're going to be using this beautiful snowflake background stencil. There are 2 stencils, but we're really only going to use one for today's card. I've got some Moonstone cardstock here, and I'm going to ink blend with 3 Distress Oxide colors. The very first color I used was Stormy Sky, and as you notice, it didn't add a whole lot to this Moonstone cardstock. So I introduced the chipped sapphire to darken it up a tad, and then I wanted it a tad darker than that. So I used some black soot. And now we can use the lawnfawn Yeti white pigment ink to stencil on our background with the snowflakes. So I'm using again just one of the snowflakes, or one of the snowflake stencils, and we'll ink that on, and it is still a little bit wet, so I'm trying not to touch that. I'm just going to set that aside for a second, and when it's dry, I'm going to die cut the stitching around this. This is the largest of the small stitched rectangle stackables. Now I'm cutting a second panel for my mechanism to match that first one. So it comes out to be 3 3/4 inch by 5 inches. So I have that panel now, and I'm die cutting all of my parts. I've got the pull tab, that's the larger portion that's stitched at the very bottom. And then we have some acetate, that's going to be the pop-up mechanism. And then we have some covers and some decorative tabs. So we'll go through that later. So I have this giant Let It Snow die, and I'm just using it right now to position where I want my mechanism to be. I want it to be centered right over the letter O on the word snow. So I've used that little carrot on this die and used my grid mat to help me line everything up. And it die cuts a little accordion here with some score lines. So you just fold it towards you, front and back. This is going to make your pull tab a little bit easier to push and pull later on, so it just makes it easier to work with. Okay, so I've labeled my panels here. So the pretty side is going to be the front, and then the ugly sides are going to be the back. I don't know about you, but my bottom cutting plate is extremely used and well loved, so I can tell which side is the front and which side is the back, but I've labeled them for you just in case. I'm going to use that pull tab, and there is a slit in it, and you're going to put that little first accordion notch through that, and then we're going to adhere that down onto that pull tab to secure it in place. I'm using a strong double-sided tape. You want to make sure that you do use a strong double-sided tape because you don't want this part to fall apart. And it's really important that you use a stronger cardstock, like at least 100 pounds or 110 pounds, to make sure that your cardstock doesn't bend or warp depending on how rough your mechanism is. So we have some double-sided tape here, and I am just doubling it up so that I can stack it up and make sure that there's plenty of room for this mechanism to work. I'm going to do this on both sides of that mechanism, and I'm going to make sure that it doesn't touch the mechanism at all, so it doesn't hinder the pull tab at all. There's lots of space at the top, so I am able to add some double-sided foam tape there to give it a lot of stability. So I'm making sure now that my pull tab pulls up and down easily, and then we can add this whole thing to a card base. Remember, we had ink blended earlier a top card panel, so that's going to go directly over this, and you don't see the mechanism at all. So once my mechanism is in place and I know that it's all lined up and I'm happy with it, I can go ahead and adhere my ink blended panel. I'm once again adding a strong double-sided adhesive here, but you don't have to use strong double-sided adhesive for this particular portion of the card. You can use liquid adhesive or even tape runner. Okay, so at this point, I think half of the card is done, right? We've got our background and we've got half the mechanism done. We just got to make sure the Flippy Flappy portion of it works. So the mechanism works. I'm just going to pull it out and decorate that bottom tab. I did use the excess cardstock that I die cut the frame from, and then I was able to grab a portion of that leftover cardstock and also die cut that decorative tab border. Now to decorate my top card panel, I'm using the giant Let It Snow word die, and I've die cut it 3 times, once in pixie dust, once in white, and then once in Moonstone cardstock, and I'm just gonna layer them together. So the white pixie dust, I'm gonna layer it with the white cardstock just to give it some extra dimension, and then on the Moonstone, I'm just gonna offset it just a tad for a shadow. When we're done with that, we can start creating our little Flippy Flappy scene. I've gone ahead and attached a few images together. Truth be told, I had to finagle with this a little bit because I didn't want the tree sticking out at the bottom of my card once I push my mechanism in. So just remember that since there's foam underneath of this, you can only make your scene so wide and so tall. So I had to squeeze these little images together to make it work, and in the end, it turned out all right. I hope you enjoyed this Flippy Flappy card. Thanks so much for stopping by and have a great day, everyone. Bye.